So this presentation is the Banzhaf Power Index for weighted voting systems. We will use this to calculate power that each player in a weighted voting system possesses. The presentation can be used to go back and complete any missed notes you may have, or just as practice or as quiz prep. So here is our sample problem we're going to work through. It is a weighted voting system, and you should note that we have a quota of 28. So there's our quota. And these are our 4 players in the system. And they go respectively from left to right: player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. And our goal is to find the Banzhaf Power Index for each player. We have the steps listed out here. First, list all the winning coalitions. Second, underline the players that are critical to the winning coalitions. And finally, we calculate the BPI for the players based on the underlining that we did with each coalition. And here is our formula. N will be replaced by the number associated with the player you're working on. So if we're talking about the player 1 BPI, it would be the number of times player 1 is critical in the numerator over the number of times all players are critical in the denominator. So we start off by finding our winning coalitions. And since there are no 1-player or 2-player coalitions that can meet the quota, we will start with the 3-player coalitions and then go on to the 4-player coalition. Now, we know that there's no 2-player coalition that meets the quota, because if we take the 2 strongest players and add them up, we get 27 votes, and we see that's still not enough to meet the quota, so we start with 3-player coalitions. I've listed all of the 3-player coalitions here. Now we want to find out whether these coalitions are winning or losing coalitions. So we add up the individual players' votes, we get the total, compare it to the quota, and then we're able to determine whether it's a winning coalition or not. So for the next team, we see the total's 33. Again, that's more than the quota, so it's another winning coalition. The next 3-player team has 30 votes, more than the 28 needed for the quota. It's another winning coalition. And if we add up each player's votes in the 4th team, we see that is not enough, and that this is a losing coalition. And that means that this coalition we will not work with anymore with this process. It will not move forward in our work. We're done with this coalition. And finally, the 4-player coalition has 42 votes. Again, that's more than the quota. So we have a total of 4 winning coalitions that we're going to move ahead with in this process. So now that we've got the winning coalitions, we're going to do a player-by-player analysis to determine which players are critical players. And we do this by saying, remove 1 player at a time. If we remove player 1 from this team, we associate that player 1 with the 15 votes in the system, and we say, well, if I subtract those 15 votes, we're left with 21 votes, and that's less than the quota. That means that if player 1 leaves, the team goes from a winning team to a losing team, and we would then underline player 1, saying that player 1 is critical. So now player 1 is underlined. We'll now say, well, what if player 2 left? Player 1 and player 3 are staying together, but player 2 is going to walk out. Well, we see player 2 has 12 votes. If player 2 takes those 12 votes and walks away, the team is left with 24 votes. That's not enough. The team goes from winning to losing. So player 2 is critical, and we underline player 2. And then we look at player 3. We say player 3 has 9 votes. If player 3 walks away with those 9 votes, the team has 27 left. Not enough to meet the quota, so the team goes from winning to losing. It means player 3 is critical, and in fact, all of the players were critical in this coalition. So we did this through player-by-player analysis, but we could have come to the same conclusion logically. Recall, we said that there is no 2-player coalition that can meet the quota. If I look at the 2 strongest players, they have 27 votes. So that means you will always need all 3 players in a 3-player coalition, since there is no 2-player combination that can get the job done. So we could have easily used that justification to underline all the players here. Again, here's the next three-player coalition. We can underline all three immediately using that logical explanation we had. I'm just going to run through it again with a player-by-player analysis because this is used most often when we can't come to a logical explanation for critical players. If player 1 walks away, they take 15 votes, and 15 votes taken away from 33 leaves us with 18. That's not enough. If player 1 leaves, it changes the team from winning to losing. That's what we define critical as, and that's how come we underline player 1. If player 2 walks away, player 2 takes 12 votes with them. 33 minus 12 is 21. That means the team goes from winning to losing. We underline player 2 as critical. Our third player is player 4. Player 4 has 6 votes. 33 minus 6 is 27. 27 is not enough. So player 4 is critical and gets underlined. Again, all three players in this coalition are critical. And again, because this is a three-player coalition, it's a winning team to start. We know it will turn to a losing team if any player leaves. So we can say that all three players are critical here as well. That brings us to our four-player coalition. Maybe everyone's critical, maybe no one's critical, maybe one or two players are critical. We have to go through the player-by-player analysis. And we see that if player 1 takes their 15 votes, 42 minus 15 leaves 27. The team goes from winning to losing. Again, that is the definition of a critical player. And we underline player 1. If player 2 leaves the team, they take 12 votes. 42 minus 12 is 30. But we say, wait a minute, that's still winning. So player 2 can walk away and it's still a winning coalition, then player 2 is not critical. To be critical, if you walk away, the team becomes losing and they need you to come back. But they don't need player 2 to come back. Player 2 is not critical. We will not underline player 2. And now we can continue doing this with player 3 and player 4, or we can say, well, player 3 has less votes than player 2. If player 2 is not critical with 12 votes, player 3 is not going to be critical with 9. And we can say the same thing for player 4. Player 4 has 6 votes. That's even less votes than player 3. So if a player is not critical with a number of votes, anyone with fewer votes will not be critical either. So we see that players 2, 3, and 4 are not critical. Only player 1 is. Now we take all of those underlines and we use it to calculate the Banzhaf Power Index for each player. Remember, the denominator is the total number of times all players are critical. That means count all of the number lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 underlines. The denominator is the 10 for all of our players. And now we want to go to the formula again and say, well, the numerator is how many times each specific player is underlined. So if we're looking at player 1, how many times was player 1 underlined? 1, 2, 3, 4. So player 4 was underlined 4 out of the 10 times. That means the Banzhaf Power Index is 4/10, or player 1 has 40% of the power in this system. Now if we go to player 2, again, we know there's 10 underlines in all, but how many of those 10 underlines belong to player 2? 1, 2, and the numerator is 2. So 2/10 is 20%. That's how much power player 2 has. Then we go on to player 3. How many times was player 3 underlined? 2 times. So 2/10 is the BPI for player 3, which is the same as 20%. And finally, player 4 had 2 underlines. So out of the 10 underlines, how many were player 4's? 2 of them. 2/10 is the Banzhaf Power Index, or we can say that's 20% of the power in the system. So now we've worked this problem out from start to finish. Hopefully your notes are complete, your questions are answered. The next slide provides you with 4 practice problems. I would pause the video here, work out these 4 problems. Once you've finished, unpause. The next slide gives us the answers. compare your answers. As long as you've got the correct answer, you're in good shape for your quiz. If you did not get the correct answer, you should email me or come in after school for help, and we can straighten out where things went wrong. So that's everything that I have to offer for your Banzhaf Power Index quiz review. Use these 4 problems as extra practice. Use the video as a way to fill in your notes with any concepts you might have been struggling with.